أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله نستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له عز وجل وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة من يطع الله ورسوله فقد رشد ومن يأسهما فإن لا يضر إلا نفسه ولا يضر الله شيئا أما بعد. فقال الله تعالى في القرآن الكريم في سورة المائدة بسم الله: اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم لنعمتي ورديت لكم الإسلام دينا. وصدق الله العظيم. بارك الله لي ولكم في القرآن الكريم ونفعني وإياكم بالذكر الحكيم إنه هو جواد رؤوف رحيم. الآن حي الترك. I seek refuge in Allah from Satan, from Shaitan, the cursed devil. In the name of Allah, the merciful, the compassionate, all praise is due to Allah. I seek His help and beg His forgiveness. And we seek refuge in Allah from the mischief and the evils of our souls. Whomsoever Allah guides, there is none who can lead that person astray, and whomsoever Allah finds in error, there is none to guide them. I bear witness that there is no God, no deity existing, therefore worthy of worship, except Almighty Allah, glory be to Him, who is one, alone, and unique, without partner or associate. And I bear witness further that Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, is Allah's servant, messenger, and apostle. And He, Allah, has sent His messenger in truth and with the truth as a bearer of glad tidings and also as a warner in advance of the hour of judgment. And therefore, whomsoever obeys Allah and His messenger, surely that person is rightly guided, and whomsoever disobeys the two of them, surely that person harms only his or her own soul. They harm not Allah the slightest little bit. That's for what follows. For Allah, glory be to Him, has said in the Quran, in the 5th surah of the Quran, the 3rd ayah, Surah Al-Ma'idah, 3rd ayah: today I have perfected your religion for you, completed my favor upon you, and established or approved Islam as your deen, and or as a deen. And surely Allah has spoken the truth. O you who worship Allah. This verse, Surah 5, ayah number 3, is the verse that the scholarly commentators of the Quran, the experts of the Quran, identify as the last verse, last ayah revealed to the Prophet, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. The way that we have the Quran compiled is not necessarily in the order of revelation. The Quran is compiled and organized according to Allah's guidance, Allah's revelation. So Surah 114, the last surah in the compilation of the Quran, was not the last ayah revealed. The ulama say, the scholars say, that this verse, this day I've perfected your religion for you, completed my favor upon you, and chosen or approved for you Islam as a deen, that was the last verse revealed to the Prophet, alayhi salam. In fact, he passed away just a couple of days after the revelation of that ayah. And oftentimes when we hear this verse recited, we listen to speech afterwards, or the lesson afterwards has to do with the completion of Islam, the perfection of Islam according to worship, according to religion. However, even though it does mean that, there is no prayer more perfect for the Muslim than the salah and the dua. Even though it does mean that, there is no way of fasting, no way of engaging in pilgrimage, no way of giving charity for the Muslim better than what was revealed to the Prophet, alayhi salam. But I want to say to you that when we confine our understanding of the ayah to that particular dimension of our religious or spiritual life, that we are cutting ourselves short. Because, as you have heard me say before, religion is not just prayer or fasting or charity or pilgrimage or any of those things. Those things are the foundation. But the word that Allah uses in the Quran, that translators of the Quran usually translate as religion, the word is Deen. And a Deen is a way of life based upon religion, or a way of life based upon what you believe. Dana yadinu, to believe. And for the Muslim, the way of life, that is Deen al-Islam, encompasses many things. Not just the obvious acts of worship, but rather it encompasses every aspect of our lives. And if you think of it that way, and you look at yourself, and you look at the Muslims, and you look at the world, then you will perhaps see or admit that all of us as individuals, us as a global faith community, us as would-be believers, are engaged in a constant struggle for a perfected deen, a constant struggle for a perfected practice of the way of life revealed by Allah. This is a task that is extremely daunting. And today I'm going to speak about this struggle for a perfected deen in another dimension. I'm not going to speak about a struggle you might be having keeping up with your prayers, as important as that is. I'm not going to speak about a struggle that you might have, keeping your obedient and worshipful life as a Muslim in order, as important as that is. But rather, I want to speak about what we must strive for as Muslims in this day and in this time. Before I go on, let me just read you a hadith about the verse that we just heard from the Quran. This is a hadith found, it's mutafaq alayhi, meaning we find it in both Sahih Muslim and Sahih Bukhari. It's narrated by Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him, who narrated, a man from the Jews said, O Amirul Mu'mineen, O leader of the believers, there is a verse you recite in your book, and had it been revealed to us as Jews, we would have taken that day, meaning the day that that verse was revealed, as a celebration. And Umar radiallahu anh asked, what verse is that? And the man recited the verse, today I have completed your religion for you, perfected my favor upon you, and have chosen Islam as your Deen. And Umar said, I know the day and place in which this verse was revealed to the Prophet, alayhi salam wa salat. It was while he was standing on Yawm al-Arafah, on the day of Arafat, on Yawm al-Jum'ah. So I want you to pay close attention and really open your mind and think about this. Here's Allah's Messenger, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, on the day of Arafat, during Hajj, on the Yawm al-Jum'ah. And Allah reveals this ayah to him. In fact, it was during his last Hajj. The Hajj where he delivered the final message to the believers, full of reminders, his last reminders to us. And during that moment, Allah reminds him and he reminds us of the necessity for perfecting our deen. In fact, it says, Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum deenukum. From kamila, to perfect, to make whole gradually. That's the connotation of the verb, meaning to come into completion or perfection a stage at a time, a degree at a time, O you who believe. So keep that here. Because what I want to warn us about is the fact that there is a spell. I mean that in the sorcery sense. A spell of deception and mind control that grips humanity at home and abroad during this moment in time and space. This spell of deception and mind control is at its seemingly most harmless expression when it manifests itself in the culture of denial, and consumerism that impacts the hearts and minds of people in this society. Everyone. And it's at its worst expression during the moments of orgy, of wanton shedding of blood and spreading of death and destruction. And I submit to you that perfection of one's Deen in this day and time, in this environment, requires a breaking of this spell of deception and mind control, which is, perpetuated by unbelievers, perpetuated by the kafirun, the mushrikun in this day and time, and standing for a manifestation of al-Islam that upholds the sacredness of life. O you who worship Allah. We live in a society in which falsehood, myths, and zulm, that Arabic word zulm, oppression, darkness. We live in a society in which zulm is normalized. We live in a society in which myths, falsehoods, things that defy logic, beliefs based on lies are normalized. Normalized in the names of the days of the week on calendars, most days of which are named after false deities and false gods of Greco-Roman origin. We live in a society in which there are national holidays, days where people get off time from work, days in which institutions are public institutions, federal institutions are closed, that are based on myths and lies and things that make no sense. Egg-laying rabbits, celebration of the birth of Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam on a day when he wasn't born. Days that lift up and celebrate narratives based on oppression. Because we happen to live in a society in which those things have been determined by conquerors. I wonder what kind of holidays there would be in Germany if the Nazis had won. I wonder if the Nazis had won World War II. I wonder what kind of holidays they would have. I wonder what kind of statues would be up in their society. I wonder what their version of history taught in the public schools would be. That's something to think about. And it's something to think about because we live in a society in which that sort of thing occurs. Let me give you two examples. Two examples. One, so-called Thanksgiving. National holiday, when in fact, based on a false narrative, that denies or obscures or just doesn't talk about the foundation of truth that lies underneath that false narrative. Thanksgiving established by the conquerors, not by the conquered, not by the people who had their land stolen, not by the people who had genocide committed against them, but by the conquerors. And it's been normalized so that people look forward to the coming of that day. People who, and they rarely pay attention, for instance, what do Native Americans do on that day? Do they sit around the table eating their food and African food, you know, traditional so-called Thanksgiving food, or Native American foods and African foods? Do they sit around the table and repeat the narratives of the people who conquered them? I don't think so. Not unless they really brainwashed. Do the people know more than the people who are the descendants of those who lived in Hiroshima and Nagasaki sit around and repeat the narratives of the people who dropped the bomb on them and celebrate that day as a holiday? No more than the people in Palestine on the day of the Nakba, you know, the day when the Balfour Declaration kicked in and their colonizers streamed forth into the Holy Land. They don't sit around on that day, the Palestinian people, and celebrate that day. Yet we live in a society where we'll sit around on that day, so-called day of Thanksgiving, and completely ignore what that day is really about, what that day signifies. You'll find people, they'll say, well, yeah, man, I know that, but you know, I don't celebrate that, man. I have the day off from work, so I just take that as a day to be with my family. Yeah, okay, I understand that. So do you all have a moment when you sit down for that dinner where you recount the truth? And I know that you're very wise and very, you know, aware, but what about your children? Or your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren? Do they know the truth behind why the family is sitting on that day? When you lift your hands for prayer, do you say out loud, have mercy on those who have been the victim of the oppression that this day is founded upon? And even though we're taking advantage of the fact that we have a day off on the plantation, you know, even during slavery, slaves had certain days off. So even though we have a day off from the plantation, let us not forget A, B, C, D, E, F, D. Is that what you do? Or do you engage in the normalization of the insidious deeds that have occurred in the birth of a nation? Nation based upon resting on the foundations of the enslavement of one people and the genocide of another. Let me give you a second example. Over the past week or so, there have been hearings, public hearings, going on all around New York City. There was just one day before yesterday. I missed it because I didn't look at the calendar right. But there's one Monday, which I intend to attend and testify at. These public hearings have to do with whether or not certain public monuments are going to be allowed to continue to stand in the city. Whether or not statues of Christopher Columbus are going to continue to stand or at long last be removed. Whether or not statues celebrating the heroes of the Confederacy will continue to stand or be removed as they have been in other parts of the state and other parts of the country. Whether or not figures like Dr. Marion Sims, who presided over a program of involuntary sterilization of women of color, involuntary because they didn't even know that they were being sterilized. They go to the hospital for treatment and have their whole life and their family life altered permanently without their permission. Just like in the history of African Americans, you know, there was an event called the Tuskegee experiments, where black men, poor black men mostly, went to the hospital for medical treatment and were injected with syphilis, injected with sexually transmitted disease, virus, syphilis, and as their health deteriorated and they died, the doctors were taking notes on them without ever telling them what their real medical problem was. This is part of the ugly history of America, man. This is what happens and has happened to people like you and I. So here in New York, they have a statue to Marion Sims, erected by people who celebrate him as a hero. Just like they celebrate Robert E. Lee, celebrate, you know, whoever. So there have been hearings going on all over the city, okay? Why did I mention that? Because these public monuments, and what I'm going to point out, it ain't just those public monuments. All over New York City, there are schools and streets and other public monuments celebrating people who were slaveholders, people who are heroes to the culture of the conquerors, but not heroes to the culture of those who were conquered, or those who were victimized, or those who were tricked, or those who were exploited, or those who were bamboozled. So this is a time, a moment in time in the evolution of man in this city and in America. That's what it is. Just like every time you turn on the news, daily, there's a story exposing some man who has sexually abused, sexually assaulted, or sexually exploited some woman. None are escaping now. But everybody being exposed. People on the right, politically, people on the left. People who are black, people who are white. People who got a lot of money, mostly, and people who don't have as much. Why is this occurring? It's a moment in the evolution of man. It's a moment where these women have said, you know what? We're not going to let this stop with Harvey Weinstein. Because I have my own Harvey Weinstein. And now I'm going to expose him. I ain't even talking about Bill Cosby anymore. Though he might fall in that category too. Allah knows best. Man goes through stages of evolution in the march toward his perfection as a species, wherein the establishment of justice becomes the priority. And whatever took place before gets washed away in the bathing of the light of truth, because this is the way that Allah has decreed it. So falsehoods and lies and monuments to misdeeds that have been normalized are uprooted during moments like this. Oh, you who worship Allah. You know, I was listening to one of the brothers said one time, yeah, man, I like to go listen to Imam Talib's khutbahs, man, because he really really be speaking about things political. I got news for you. These things are political, are solely political in a secular mind. In a religious mind, in a believing mind, I'm not talking politics. It's not a matter of politics, it's a matter of morality. Morality, right and wrong, by a moral standard established by Allah and His Messenger. That's what we're doing here. When we live in a society in which social policies are weaponized and turned loose on the vulnerable in the society, prison industrial complex, exploitative health care, all of those kinds of things, those are immoralities that are being practiced. Those are manifestations of zulm, of injustice, of oppression, of wrong, moral wrong, that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala raised up His prophets to confront and do away with. Oh, you who believe. So when Allah says that on that day that He completed the revelation of the Quran and perfected the religious way of life for the believers, that's the day when Allah established truth for all times. That's the day when Allah completed a way of life based upon worship of the God of justice. That's the day on which Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, glorified and exalted be He, says the normalization of falsehood and disobedience and worship of false gods is over as of this day. Now, sure, people will wrestle with the dynamics of that. He said He perfected the Deen. He didn't say He perfected people. So Sheikh Alama Tawfiq Rahmatullah alayhi, my Sheikh, the founding Imam of this Jamaat, he used to say, Allah said He perfected Islam. He didn't say He perfected Muslims. So even after that day, we have continued to see these things occur. But the excuse for them the normalization of them, the establishment of those things, man, them days are over, man. As long as there's someone to adhere and hold up the truth according to what Allah has revealed. And as long as there are those who follow the leadership of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to whom the Quran was revealed. Oh, you who worship Allah, think about these things. Because we are under a spell of deception and mind control. Falsehoods, lies. Let me give you one last example. I'm going to sit down on the first part. Turned on the news this morning. There's a story on the news that said last night, on so-called Thanksgiving, that there was a long line of people that formed outside of Macy's department store. And they were standing on line in the cold, waiting for the department store to open. I think it opened at midnight or something. So that they could go in and start their Christmas shopping. And they showed these people standing on line, experiencing panic attacks. And as soon as the clock struck and they opened the door to that grand department store, people were rushing in a frenzy, grabbing stuff. Oh, here, throw that over here. I mean, turn on New York 1 when you go home. It's a revelation. I said to myself, these are people completely absorbed in the culture of consumerism that grips the society. Thanksgiving, man, they thankful they can go get online and spend their money. But that's where we live. That's the spell that millions of people are under in the society. Some of you Muslims come here from other countries, get caught right up in the spell. As the sister Imam was saying a few weeks ago, you come right here from the land of the Quran and Sunnah. Halloween comes, and you dressing your Muslim babies up like jinn and dead people and going around following a cultural custom that you know nothing about. Why? Because America is under a spell. And Allah has guided us to Islam to free our minds from that spell. Regardless of what you were doing before, regardless of what you didn't understand before, now Allah has given us the means to lift the spell of deception and mind control. And may Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala have mercy on us. Subhanallah. Alhamdulillah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم بارك وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد عليه السلام والصلاة وعلى آله وأصحابه وأنصاره أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وبعد. وقال الله تعالى في سورة البقرة وإذ قال ربك للملائكة إني جائل في الأرض خليفة قالوا أتجعل فيه من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَسِّسُ لَكَ قَالَ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ وصدق الله العظيم. اللهم اغفر لنا مسلمين ومسلمات ومؤمنين ومؤمنات ومحسنين ومحسنات وبعد. For Allah said, note that occasion when your Lord said to the angels, I'm going to place a vicegerent on earth. They said, will you place therein one who will make mischief and shed blood while we glorify your praises and sanctify your name? Allah said, I know what you know not. O you who believe. I stated in the first part of the khutbah that the seemingly most harmless expression of the spell of deception and mind control is this normalization, cultural normalization of evil and a culture of falsehood and consumerism. I also said that the worst expression of that, the worst expression of the influence of shaitan is the orgy of wanton bloodshed, death, and destruction that visits the societies of man every day. Today is already past the time of Jummah in other parts of the world. I had the news on with the sound off, which, as I told you, is how I'm watching it nowadays. I turn on the news and turn off the sound. You know, they got the subtitles on the bottom, so as I'm doing other things, I just look at that. I want that stuff filtering in through my eardrums. Latest manifestation of Agent Orange's madness of the day. I don't want to hear that stuff every day, man. Because there's not a day when he doesn't manifest his problem. Psychiatrists say it's, malignant narcissism. I'll go into that another time. So I turn on the news, but I click off the sound. I look at the television screen. There's a story burning up the airwaves that some people bombed a masjid in Egypt during Salatul Jummah and then gunned down the Muslims as they came running out of the masjid trying to escape the death and destruction. And according to what was being said, and Allah knows best, there were some Muslims who were doing that. ISIS and whoever. I thought to myself, what kind of Muslim would do something like that? Then I remembered a couple of years ago where some other Muslims did the same thing in a masjid in Nigeria during Ramadan. And then before I could finish what I was doing and go out the door to come here, there was another story flashing across the screen. Gunshots in London, it said. And they show, the police running, trying to see what this is about. Is this a so-called terrorist attack or whatever? And those of us who live in America, we can't be holding our nose up in the air like those savage people over there are engaged in that kind of behavior, because that kind of behavior is manifested here in America every day. Now people get together, go to church, get gunned down in huge numbers. People get together, go to the movies. Some guy dressed like the Joker, Batman's enemy, joker jumps up and guns people down. Black churches, white churches, schools, wherever else, constant violence and shedding of blood in the society. Reminds you of the description of the Prophet ﷺ, who said that one of the signs of the last days would be the prevalence of harlotry. And you look at the hadith, he said it twice. It said, Ya Rasulullah, the believers that, Ya Rasulullah, ma taqumu sa'a. When will the day of ours come? He said, when there will be harlotry. Harlotry, translation, murder. He said it more than once to emphasize wanton murder, widespread murder. And this is what the angels were talking about when Allah said to them, well, you know, I'm getting ready to create this species called man, and I'm going to put him on earth as a Khalifa, as an authority who rules, an authority who rules with authority given by me. The angels said, Ya Allah, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to put somebody in charge who's going to spread blood or shed blood wantonly with constant acts of murder and carnage? Allah said, I know what you don't know. I know how I created them. And yeah, they have the capacity to be about that, but they have the capacity to be about something else too. Yeah, they have vulnerability to the whisper of the shaitan, and when the shaitan gets the whispering in their ear, they do all kind of destructive things. They'll stick it in their arm or stick it up their nose or pour it down their throat, listening to shaitan. They'll murder their loved ones, murder their wife, murder their husband, murder their babies, murder people who they know well, people who they don't know at all, listening to the whisper of shaitan. They'll stand up spouting noble slogans and then engage in ignoble deeds, listening to the whisper of shaitan. I know that because I'm Allah and I know everything. But there will also be those who are in obedience to me. There will also be people who are people of peace and justice. There will also be people who, even as they fight those who are their enemies, will not go beyond the line that I have drawn between the halal and the haram. Perfect example, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, who during one of the ghazawa, one of the battles that the Prophet alayhi salam and the companions, may Allah be pleased with them, were fighting against the kuffar who oppressed them and killed them and murdered them. So during one particular battle, Ali ibn Abi Talib, it wasn't Umar, it was Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anh. He's fighting with one guy. He knocks the guy down to the ground, draws his sword, and moves in for the kill. And in a final act of defiance, his enemy spits in his face. He's laying on his back. He's getting ready to get done in. He hawks up and spits in Ali's face. Ali looks at him, puts his sword back in the scabbard, turns and walks away. It was such an astonishing moment that the guy who was about to be killed called out. I don't know about you, somebody get ready to kill me and they change their mind. I'm not going to ask why. But the guy called out, Ali, what's happening, man? I thought you was, getting ready to do me in. Ali turned to him and said, yeah, I was. But I was getting ready to do you in for Allah. But when you spit in my face, man, you made it personal. So if I had killed you at that moment, it would have been for me and not for Allah. And I'm not out here for me. I'm out here for Allah. So, man, you got that, man. Catch you next time, man. I wonder how many people raising the call to jihad and blowing up people and doing all kind of stuff. I wonder how many of them have the faith of Ali ibn Abi Talib, may Allah be pleased with him, to obey the line drawn by Allah and say, well, this is as far as I go. You want to go further, that's on you, and Allah will deal with you. But I don't want to be called out on the day of judgment for being disobedient in the name of establishing obedience. I don't want to be called out on the day of judgment for engaging in that which is unlawful, while at the same time calling for the establishment of the lawful. No, two wrongs don't make a right, man. Right makes right. And Allah has determined what is right. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala give us clarity. I say again, there's a spell of deception and mind control that grips humanity at home and then abroad. Let us strive for purity of intention and elevated understanding of Deen al-Islam, because the reward from Allah for Islam is not in the slogan, it's in the deed. It's not in the word, it's in the practice. And may Allah strengthen your and my practice of His deen. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Ameen.